Even though we're in the heart of the football season, it's never too early to talk about some Louisville basketball. So that's exactly what we're going to do on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode is brought to you by Underdog. Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com with the promo code Locked On and get your first deposit doubled up to $100. As always, I want to say thank you all for making Locked On the Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Look, I know I said that this bonus episode to conclude the month was going to be about recruiting, but I decided to switch it up a little bit. I want to talk about some Louisville basketball. We'll start out by discussing why this is a huge breakout caliber season for Ellis. We will dive into that. We'll also give 3 bold predictions for the upcoming season for the Cardinals, and then finally we will dive into the weekly mailbag. So starting out with Ellis. Now look, is it a hot take to say that Ellis is primed for a breakout season? Well, of course not. I think that everyone in the Louisville fan base probably is on that train. Now, maybe a couple people aren't necessarily too high on Ellis, but the majority of the fan base knows that the second year within this program could be a huge season for Ellis, the former JUCO player out of Tallahassee. Well, actually, he's from North Carolina, but played in the JUCO Bowl in Tallahassee. But why is that, though? You know, we talk about, Ellis could be a breakout player. But why? Like, what do you see from Ellis that leads you to believe that? That's what I want to cover on this episode of the show. Ellis is a point guard. Let's get that out of the way. A lot of people refer to L as a shooting guard, a combo guard, what have you. Ellis, in my opinion, from what I've seen from him at the community college level and from his time at Louisville so far, is that he is a point guard. Now, I will caution those to truly look too much into what we saw last season. Anything that could have gone wrong for the Cardinals, well, it went wrong, especially on the offensive end. The Louisville offense, it felt like a team was running a style of offense that they didn't necessarily maybe have the strength to run, or maybe they had a strength to run a different offense and didn't run that offense. Basically, bottom line is that this team looked like they were trying to find their identity on offense throughout the whole season. I'm not sure that there was really ever a stretch in the season to where you can look back on and think, well, they found their groove. They played to their strengths. I don't necessarily think that was ever the case. It was a team that was shooting a lot of three-pointers and statistically not a team that shot well from behind the arc. And I think that the team didn't necessarily play fast, but had the athletes to do so. Played kind of very slow, despite the talk in the offseason last year that it was going to be a team that was going to shoot a lot more threes. Play quicker on offense. We just didn't necessarily see that. Well, now Kenny Payne, since taking the job, has been very, very adamant that this was going to be a system that utilized transition offense, that utilized good defense turning into offense, and passing the basketball abundantly. Now, obviously, that could be coach speak, but through the indications of off-season workouts and practices thus far, the players have said that they see a huge difference between last year and this year in terms of the speed of the game and definitely the speed of the offense. Kenny Payne is getting out and utilizing Kenny Payne is utilizing getting out and moving in transition and utilizing good defense turning into good offense. And he's been very, very adamant on that being the style of play that he desires as the head coach here at the University of Louisville. Ellis, I think, has the skill set to run that offense specifically, as he does probably any offense out there. But specifically this one, L is extremely athletic. 6'2", 6'3". I think he's probably more on the 6'3" side. The Durham, North Carolina native showed last season that he has the speed to get into the lane and find his teammates. Reminded me a lot of like a sophomore year Russ Smith. Now, a lot of people have said that my guys over at the State of Louisville, I think Presley Meyer was one of the guys that said that he reminds him of a sophomore year Russ Smith. Now, if I'm crediting that quote to the wrong person, I do apologize, but it seems like that's probably been said a couple times by a handful of different people, and I see it, because the talent is there. There's some mental mistakes, kind of going through the growing pains, adjusting to the speed of high-level Division I basketball, working through the growing pains with the ball in his hands. Now, there were some instances where, made some turnovers that were, mental mistakes, poor shot selection at times, but you also saw those glimpses of pure brilliance. Ellis showed during some stints last season to be a microwave scorer. We saw that in a handful of games, shooting the ball solid from behind the arc. I look at him as a 3-level scorer because I think that with the added comfort and development heading into year 2, I think he's going to utilize the mid-range more, has to do a better job of finishing around the rim, but I think that comes with allowing the game to slow down, and you can't overlook that progression that he's going to see from year 1 in ACC play to year 2. You're in a system now to where it utilizes his speed, allows him to play fast. I think that he's a solid decision maker, a solid passer, and a lot of people be like, what did you see from last year that led you to believe that? And you saw it in spurts, you saw it in instances, you saw it examples of those flashes. But like I said, I caution those to take too much from last season, because how can you expect a player to really show out when there really wasn't a certain system in place? The system that was in place doesn't or wasn't working for the team, wasn't utilizing the skill set and the strengths of the team for whatever reason, and it just didn't look like the team was comfortable on the offensive end from the very first game to the final game in the ACC tournament. So I think with more of a solid structure offensively, in terms of a scheme, in terms of a style of play, Ellis is going to benefit significantly. Obviously, I think that if Louisville is able to improve their perimeter shooting, something that they haven't really done in a couple seasons, then Ellis's stock is going to go through the roof. Look, he's a point guard in my eyes. I look at him as a guy that should be handling the basketball and facilitating the offense, and he can definitely do so. You're going to see this year. If you don't believe me, you're going to see. The only thing that I can tell you is just wait and see. I saw enough from him at the community college level. Now, granted, that was at the community college level, or I'm sorry, the JUCO level. I should say. I could say community college. I think it was Tallahassee Community College was the school in which he came from. JUCO, community college, whatever you want to call it, the JUCO level. He definitely excelled there as a point guard. Reminded me of a Russ Smith in the sense of, he's probably more of a score-first guard, but does a good job of setting up his teammates to where I feel comfortable with him as the lead guard, and not like I don't think it's going to be a Carlik Jones situation to where, he's handling the ball a lot and all he's really going to be doing is scoring. Now, that's no knock on Carlik's game, because what Carlik brought to the table is desperately, or what Louisville desperately needed. But at the end of the day, I think that this is an instance to where, they're going to need a primary scorer. Now, whether Ellis is that or not, they need a point guard as well. And I think that is that guy that can give you buckets, but also set up teammates, find the open guys, especially when you have some athletic guys that could be solid in pick and roll situations like Sidney Curry, Roosevelt Wheeler, Braden Huntley-Hatfield, JJ Traynor, so on and so forth. We'll kind of see, Jae'Lyn Withers, he's another guy that I'm looking to get back into the groove. So I think that, look, I'm very high on Ellis, and a lot of other people are as well, but nobody really dives into why that is. It's just a matter of falling back on, more familiarity with the level of ACC play, and then just natural progression from year one to year two in this program. And I do agree with that. I think that they're pretty much spot on, and I think that those are two big keys as to why he's going to improve from year one to year two, and why he's definitely going to be a breakout candidate. But I think I want to take it a little bit further by saying that we're going to see him have more freedom to be able to utilize his athleticism and his speed in this offense that is going to emphasize moving fast with and without the ball, solid passing and getting out and running in transition, where I think that Ellis is going to thrive in a setting, in a situation to where his skill set and his strengths are going to be put on display. And then obviously you have Nolan Smith as a mentor, Kenny Payne, another solid talent developer as well, Danny Manning, so on and so forth. The opportunity is there. The shots are going to be there. The playing time is going to be there. And the Cardinals are going to need to rely on him. So there's a plethora of reasons why I think that Ellis is going to have a big season, and I think it's a matter of being in a system now to where we're going to see him be more of a point guard, and when he's passing the ball, I think is when he's at his most lethal against opposing defenses, is allowing that vision to be put on full display. So I want to go into a little bit of a fun segment talking about 3 bold predictions for the team coming up. We're going to do that here in just a second after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Underdog Fantasy. It's the easiest place to spice up the college football season. You pick 2 to 5 players across any team, not just the Louisville Cardinals, and decide if they will finish higher or lower. It's one of the easiest fantasy games to play out there, and you can win cold hard cash in a single game. I encourage you to go to the Underdog website, go see the total for Malik Cunningham that has been put on the website. 2 that I like are the Drake May higher than 265.5 passing against Virginia Tech, under 220.5 passing for Grant Wells against UNC. So sign up with the promo code Locked On, one word, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 for free. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com or find the Underdog Fantasy app in the App Store or Google Play. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. So 3 bold predictions for the Louisville Cardinals basketball team. Now, granted, I will say that they are bold predictions for a reason. These probably, maybe aren't likely to happen. They might not be likely at all. And they all 3 do not have to happen at the same time. I'm not saying that they're all going to happen at the same time. They're just 3 predictions that I think are fun, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they end up coming true. So if you're like, oh, they're never going to happen, hence the term bold. Just have to get that out of the way, because you think people would understand that, but they're like, oh, there's no way that's going to happen, Dalton. That's why they're called bold predictions. If you don't like them, then make your own bold predictions. It is what it is. First bold prediction for me is that Braden Huntley-Hatfield will lead the team in points. Huntley-Hatfield last season for Tennessee averaged just under 4 points per game, but I think he has the skill set to be an absolute star at the college level. An off-season of development and growth under 2 solid developers for big men. Kenny Payne and Danny Manning have a solid track record in that category. Showed last year the range is there. Showed flashes of being able to stretch the floor, being a solid passing big, being able to shoot the 3 ball from the corner, and just having the skill and finesse to be a very solid player. Look, last year he was 17 to start the season, and you're reclassifying. Supposed to be a high school senior. He averaged 4 points a game. Had an injury in the season that prevented him from playing sometime. Played for a Tennessee team under Rick Barnes that had a very loaded depth chart, so not a lot of opportunity there. Only played about 12.5 minutes of nightly action on average. So I think that this is an opportunity for him to really have a breakout season. I think he's going to be a starter this year, and you're maybe going to see him average over double figures, in my opinion. Will he be the leading scorer? I mean, probably not. Ellis and Sidney Curry are probably going to be 2 guys that will get into that mix. But look, I think that this is an opportunity, really, really seriously, that Braden Huntley-Hatfield is going to be a solid player, a solid contributor for this team. He's going to be relied upon to be a solid contributor. But I think that, without saying, my first bold prediction is that Huntley-Hatfield ends up as the number one scorer for the Louisville Cardinals because of that talent he has. He has a year of college ball under his belt, and seeing that development from Kenny Payne and Danny Manning, I think that the potential is limitless. Second prediction is that Kamari Lands, the true freshman, will average in double figures. I can't think of the last time that a true freshman did that for the Louisville Cardinals, but all accounts and reports out of off-season camp and early on this fall is that Kamari Lands looks very solid. The high four-star prospect in the 2022 class chose the Cardinals over Syracuse and company, committed to Chris Mack's program, but stayed committed when Chris Mack agreed to the buyout and Kenny Payne took over. Kamari Lands likely to play the 2 or the 3 combo guard forward, solid shooter, but I like his ability to create his own shot, in the 6'7", 6'8" range. I think the opportunity is there. It would not surprise me if he starts as the shooting guard for the Cardinals. If not, I think that he's going to be a very valuable piece off the bench. But it seems like, he was kind of in the same boat as Mike James was last year before James unfortunately had that Achilles injury, and that's absolutely showing out in practice. And I think that, hey, look, Kamari Lance is a player that who knows? The coaching staff is very high on him. Like I said, there's been, reports coming out of practice that he has been an absolute, stud, an absolute phenom. Now, granted, is he going to be a lottery pick? I mean, I don't necessarily think that, but I mean, he's been a guy that has been talked about very highly. The bold prediction for me is that he'll average in double figures because I think that he is a polished scorer. He has a 3-level scoring potential, and I like the upside there as a scorer. So the second bold prediction for me simply is, Kamari Lands averaging in double figures. The third one, this one I kind of went back and forth. I was like, should I go this route? Should I go that route? It is what it is. But finally, I came down to the consensus that I think that Sydney Curry is going to be a first-team All-ACC selection. A bold prediction, number 3 for me, is that the former JUCO player will end up as a first-team selection. Averaged just over 7 points per game, but had limited game action, but definitely was the best player on the team in ACC play. Looked unguardable at times. If he's able to extend that range any, he obviously has the college-ready body. He showed that last year with his strength. I think with him being able to pass out of the low block with another year in college basketball, and then obviously kind of like Braden Huntley-Hatfield, getting off-season direction under Kenny Payne, under Danny Manning. I think the sky is the limit here. I think that Sydney Curry definitely could be a player that, by this time in March, definitely could be talking about him as an all-ACC caliber player. First team is the bold prediction. I would expect for him to be at least an honorable mention, probably a double-figure scorer, averaging over 7 rebounds per game. He's going to be a very tough player to guard for opposing defenses, not only in the ACC, but for all of the out-of-conference teams that the Cardinals will play. So I think that Sydney Curry is possibly going to be an All-ACC selection, All-ACC first-team selection. That's my third bold prediction, probably the most likely out of the 3. Like I said, Braden Huntley-Hatfield's progression is going to be pretty significant in my opinion. Kamari Lands could definitely come onto the scene and surprise a lot of people in the national media. So I want to take this time now to dive into the weekly mailbag before we wrap up this month's content. And before I do that, I want to say thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. It's also free on YouTube and WHAS 11 Plus. If you go to WHAS11.com, scroll down to the sports section, you can watch all of the podcast videos on the WHAS 11 website and also on YouTube. So But diving into the mailbag, I have a couple of solid questions. The first one is, with the success that James Madison has had early on in the season, just beating App State, do you feel any different about that matchup? Not really. I think it's a trip-up game. I thought it's definitely a trap game before the season. I definitely think so now. I mean, they have one of the best rushing defense in the country right now, I do believe. They've been very, very solid throughout the season, handling opposition, defeating App State, who's given fits to, they went down and beat Texas A&M. They almost beat North Carolina. That's a very good team in Boone, North Carolina. Look, James Madison is a solid team, and I think that Louisville should beat that team. And I think that if you're suggesting that Louisville is going to lose to James Madison, I think that that's more of a slight toward the Cardinals. Is there a possibility? Sure. Louisville's definitely going to have to handle business. I think it's just honestly a reiteration of this team needing to handle business and not sleepwalking into that matchup in early November. So, or maybe October. I'm not sure when that matchup is. But the next question, we will go along. How many games does Louisville need to win in a row for you to feel that the Cardinals have gotten back on track? I think definitely the next two to getting to 4-2, because that game against Pittsburgh in week 7 is a game that I predict Louisville to lose. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that I think they had to go at 5-2 to get back on track, because 4-2, although I kind of had them at 5-1 through the first 6 games, 4-2 I would assume is probably a better back on track, because they handle business against the 3 teams after the Florida State loss that they were supposed to in South Florida, Boston College, and Virginia. And if you lose to Pittsburgh, I mean, maybe it's not ideal, but then if you pick up that win against James Madison, all you have to do is pull off one upset in the last, four games or so, and make it to where you are getting to the line of bowl eligibility. So yeah, 4-2. If you want to say winning the Pittsburgh game to get back on track, I'm not going to say you're wrong, but I think that that's very rich, despite kind of stumbling out of the gate, because 4-2 is 4-2. In Pittsburgh is probably going to be ranked heading into that game at Cardinal Stadium. So the next question is, on your previous episodes discussing Louisville guard Fabio Basili, you haven't necessarily been too high on him coming out of the gates for this upcoming season. I feel like you're being disrespectful along with a handful of the fan base. I'll be honest. I don't think it's disrespectful at all. In fact, I think that it's realistic. And I have to question, I think that my question to this question in response is, how is it being disrespectful? Because I'm not predicting Basili to be a starting caliber ACC level guard year 1, coming into the program late in August, a guy that wasn't even ranked in the final recruiting ranking. I'm sorry, in reclassifying, as a matter of fact, or I'm sorry, maybe I think he was reclassified and then he ended up in his original class. But look, we aren't even expecting that much out of Devin Ree, who is ranked significantly higher than Basili, and Kamari Lands is it's being expected a lot of him. But if he were to maybe not necessarily live up to the expectations, I don't think a lot of people would lose sleep over that. Look, here's my take on this. You can be excited for the future with Basili. Look, I mentioned on his commitment episode podcast that I think he has the skill set to be a solid guard in the ACC conference. I think he has a solid potential to be good in this system, in the college ranks. He has good size, being 6'5". I like his facilitating ability. I think he has defensive upside, and his scoring repertoire. I think he's just scratching the potential of what he could be as a scorer. Look, I think he's a solid player, and I think that maybe he's definitely on the underrated sense because of what he's able to do at the high school level, and maybe he should be ranked. But I'm not going to sit here and put expectations that he should be averaging double figures and being a key part of this rotation year 1, despite Louisville's needs for guards, because I don't think it's fair to him. Because let's say he doesn't necessarily come out of the gates right away and have a lot of success. Well, then you're going to be placing, a lot of unfair criticism onto him, when in reality, you need to be patient. It might take a year or two for him to really find himself in this system, to be able to develop his skill set and, get to a place in his, in his basketball career to where he's ready for that college level production. I'm not saying he's not going to be. I don't know really where this question is coming from. I don't think I was ever disrespectful. I don't really even think I was ever unfair to suggest that we should kind of relax on expectations and just be in a wait and see approach and be patient, because I didn't want to see unfair expectations or unfair criticism placed on Basili's production, because I realized that it's going to take possibly some time for him to get to a level to where we are seeing him produce at a significant rate. But like I said, if he ends up being a solid level or a solid, contributor in this system year one, fantastic. I really hope he is. And Kenny Payne has been, very, very excited about what he's seen from him early on. But we should be in a wait and see approach. We should be patient and work through the growing pains and understand that he's going to make some mistakes along the way. He could be very solid year one, but that's within context. I think that is a second level player. I don't think he's a starter year one, nor do I think most of the fan base does as well. That's why I don't necessarily understand why the question suggests that I was being disrespectful, because I don't feel like I was being disrespectful at all. But regardless, that's going to wrap up this edition of the show. Be sure to check out the Locked On ACC podcast hosted by Candace Cooper for all your conference news and such. That's going to wrap up this final September episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. Go Cards. We'll see you back here on Monday.